I had a couple of verses that I wanted to go over, and they each speak to or epitomize a particular facet of the discussion I want to have. So what I thought we would do is we'll go over the verses, and I'll give you guys a really good understanding of what they're saying. And then I want you guys to see if you can figure out how they fit together. Did you guys follow? All right, here we go. Ne abhikrama nashosti pratyavayo na vidyate. Neha abhikrama nasho asti. There is no loss in this effort. There's no loss in this effort. Pratyavayo na vidyate. You also don't find any diminution or decrease. There's no loss or there's no decrease in this effort. You follow? The effort is the effort to achieve yoga, specifically buddhi yoga, an enlightened way of interacting with the world. Buddhi means enlightened. So the yoga of enlightenment, in that path, that's what's just been defined. And so Krishna's encouraging Arjuna to undertake buddhi yoga, this path of enlightenment. That's probably yoga refers to the goal of a union, but it also refers to the path by which one achieves the goal. Did you follow that? So yoga can either be the practice that gets you there, or it can be the destination once you've arrived. The word yoga is used both for the journey as well as for the destination. And don't try to get sexy and be like, but the destination is the journey. That's not always true. Sometimes the journey is distinct from the destination. Sometimes they're one and the same. It's kind of another topic, and the absolute idea that the journey is always a destination, I think, is pretty easily falsifiable. But in the case of the term yoga, it's used both to designate the path as well as the arrival at the destination. In this sense, buddhi yoga, the yoga of enlightenment, I think translates pretty well into English as the path of enlightenment. Because Krishna describes the path as well as the destination. Did you guys follow that? It's interesting, sometimes when you train, I was just watching a critique of knife defense techniques. So techniques by which an unarmed person defends against an armed opponent, because that's what I do with my free time. And so I was watching a critique of like a real popular Penkat Silat is Indonesian, and Kali is a Filipino knife fighting techniques. It's interesting, but like if you're a boxer, you spend a lot of time running, you spend a lot of time jumping rope, you spend a lot of time lifting weights, football players, when they want to test football players, they have you do the NFL Combine, which is a bunch of weightlifting and running drills. That's not actually what you do on the football field if you're playing football. But there are these drills that you do. You work on core motor skills, and then those get applied when you play the game. But the practice drills you do aren't always just practicing the thing that you're going to do, even for money. You do a lot of partial movements or supportive movements or what might be called accessory work. That's okay, I'll survive. It'll ring then, the whole scene. It's a recent thing. When I first started doing mixed martial arts, we would spar every day. And I got concussed a number of times, which isn't ideal. Ideally, you don't want to get concussed very often. And fights would regularly get called off because the guys who were fighting would get injured in training, and there were way more injuries in training than actual injuries in fighting. Did you follow this? Anyway, at some point, there was a guy named Colin Oyama figured it out. You should spar light, because if you spar heavy, you're just going to take too much trauma and you're going to have a short-lived career. And there's a guy named Max Holloway who did the same thing I did, and he suffered a bunch of concussions and he started getting kind of loopy. You could see in interviews. And then he stopped sparring. So he would train for a fight and never spar the whole training camp. Which seems kind of crazy, right? And he started doing really well. He started winning really, decisively in his last few outings since he stopped sparring. It's interesting, isn't it? Sometimes the journey is different than the destination. Anyway, I think that this Buddha yoga translates really nicely as the path of enlightenment. So, na iha, in this path, the path of enlightenment that was described in the previous verse, there is, in this abhikram, in this path, in this undertaking, in this effort to achieve this, there is no nasha, no destruction. No pratyavaya, there's no diminution. No vidite, you won't find any of that. Svalpam api asya dharmasya. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Alpa means a little bit. Just a little bit of this dharma. Dharmasya means of this dharma. Trayate mahato bhayat. It delivers you from the greatest fear, from the great fear. In this path, there's no loss or diminution. And even a little advancement in this dharma delivers you from the greatest fear. That's the first verse. Did you guys follow that? The second thing I want to talk about, I'm going to give you 3 verses for the second one. I'll give them to you in order. So the next 3 verses are part of the same concept. Okay? Ananya chintayanto mam. Ye jana paryupasate. Those who worship me by thinking of me undeviatingly. Tesham nityabhiyuktanam. To those people who are always yoked to me through their undeviating thought. Yogakshemam aham yaham. I carry them what they lack and I preserve what they have. First verse, in this path there's no loss or diminution, and even a little advancement can save you, can deliver you from the greatest fear. That's verse 1. And verse 2, 3, and 4 are different ideas. Yes, and these are all in the same genre. Second one is, to those who always think of me without deviation and who are always yoked to me through their thoughts, I carry them what they lack and I preserve what they have. And then Tesham evanukampartam ahamagyana tamaha nashayami. I destroy the darkness of ignorance. Jnanadipena bhashvata, with the shining lamp of knowledge in the heart of those people who strive towards me, out of compassion for them. And the last verse is Sarvadharman priyaja mamekam sharanam braja aham tvam sarva papebhya mokshayishami. I will liberate you from all difficulties. Just do one thing, give up all dharma and take shelter of me. Mashuchaha, don't fear. All right, so the first verse. In this path, there's no loss or diminution, and even a little bit of advancement on this path of Dharma can save you from the greatest fear. That's verse number 1. Verse 2, 3, and 4. To those who think of me always without deviation and ever yoked with me, to me, for them I carry them what they lack, I preserve what they have. In fact, out of compassion, I destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. And if you give up all dharma and just take shelter of me, I'll deliver you from all difficulties. Don't fear. Was that too much? Too many verses? It was going to be 2, it became 4. But 2, 3, and 4 all in the same bucket. 1's over here, and 2, 3, and 4 in the same bucket. What do you guys see? Think about it. I'm gonna call on you. I see your hand. You don't have to keep I looked right at you. You know I saw you. The reason I'm not calling anybody is I want you guys to think. How many of you think you saw what was going on? Raise your hand. Okay, how many of you didn't see what was going on? Raise your hand. All right. Okay. How many of you are really sure you got it? That if I said really sure and you go like this, it doesn't count. How many of you are 100% sure you're in? You're like, does anybody think they got it?
towards enlightenment.
Krishna's building a case for why you should take the journey towards enlightenment. Yeah, it's not wrong. Okay. It's good. Sure, he says, he's telling you there's no loss or diminution. I'll help you out. Sure, okay, great, good. All the good things you get. Yes, sir. Loud.
I was going to say the relationship that exists as a part of grace or a tradition of grace.
All right, so there's some ideas of grace that are definitely in some of the verses, for sure, okay? Maybe all of them. Those are both astute takes. I don't agree with either of them. I'll tell you why in a minute. But, I mean, this is just, you could parse up the verses any way you want to and derive all sorts of different meanings out of them. I have my angle, so I have to have the right answer because I'm asking you, what am I thinking of? So, I have a decided advantage in that I can arbitrarily think whatever I want, and then if you guess what I would say, it's like if I say, I'm going to pick a number, and you guess it, I'm going to try to demonstrate what the verses and why I've juxtapositioned the verses the way I have. But I think that both of your takes on it are quite astute. I think they have value. They don't get to the heart of what I wanted to do, which is fine. What do you got?
So I was going to say the grace thing.
Okay.
But there's something else there where I think that you're talking about the path towards enlightenment is something that you actually can't do. It's like you actually need the
That's grace.
Yeah, so it's just the grace thing.
You're just trying to get fancy on that. Okay. You could have just said what he said.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not as stupid as I look, If you're not just going to use some fancy words, like there's some je ne sais quoi about the necessity of the blessedness that must descend upon you. And I'm going to be like, oh wow, that's really cool. That's just the thing he said in fancier languages. You got it? You got something for me, Ian? Loud.
Well, I noticed in the first verse it was about the path of Dharma, and then in the second group of verses it talked about not taking up the path of Dharma.
I noticed that as I was quoting the verses, the first verse said, in this Dharma, and the last verse says, give up all Dharma. That wasn't what I was going for, but I noticed that and I was like, ooh, that's kind of cool. Also, some of the verses said, Tesham, for them. There were some cool things like that in the Sanskrit, and I'm not expecting you guys to notice. But I'm impressed that you did notice that one. That was cool. That wasn't what I was going for either, but also good. Astute stuff. Everybody's doing good except for... You need to read more Wittgenstein and learn ordinary language philosophy instead of getting all fancy with your philosophy degree. Okay. Somebody else raised their hand. Yeah, please.
It's a very simple way to put it. You just can't go wrong. You can walk towards me, and if you take one small step, I'm going to carry you for what you lack. But if you let go and surrender, you don't really have to do anything except that act of letting go. So it just seems like there's just no wrong can be done. Like, what do you have to lose if you walk toward me? What do you have to lose if you let go?
I very much appreciate that. And I think you might have unknowingly gotten what I was saying. I'll get back to you in a minute. I'm going to get back to all you guys. I don't want to give you each feedback because then it gives away the answer, and I feel like it's coming out now. Everybody's waking up. So I'm going to come back to you, but I very much appreciate what you said. Thank you. Radhe, are there any women who want to talk, or is it just like a male-dominated patriarchy over here? Yeah.
Grace is included in this, but I think all of the verses describe loving and reciprocal relationship. And so while grace is included in that, I think it needs to be like a bigger and grander.
Okay. I appreciate that. I mean, I guess there's reciprocal relationships where you beat me and then I hate you. That would be a reciprocal relationship, but this is a reciprocal relationship that's based on grace. I don't know that it adds too much. Grace means reciprocal. You follow? Mm-hmm. The very nature, unless you believe in a monergism, where everything is God's responsibility in a predetermined world. Monergism means it's all God's responsibility. So if you surrender to God, that's his job to make you surrender. You have no free will. But in a free will universe, then grace necessitates reciprocation. You're receptive, and then you get grace. And grace is a benevolent type of reciprocity.
I understand now.
So, I mean, I appreciate you saying something. You're the first girl to participate, so you get, and I think we have a participation award for you for, but you're mildly in the same category as Nick over there. Not in a bad way, but I think you actually took a step back from grace, because grace, I think, at least as it's generally understood, where you have to accept that grace, it entails reciprocation as an operating system that is at play automatically. It's a presumption of the idea of grace. Did you follow that?
Yes.
And as I was saying that, I realized there is a version of grace. It's called monergism. It's John Calvin's philosophy, the Protestant theologian, the incredibly popular Protestant theologian John Calvin. I believe he was in the 1500s. He might have been in the early 1600s, but I believe he was operating in the 1500s. And he had a monergistic understanding, which runs into a host of problems, because then evil becomes God's fault. Who else? Yeah, Mason.
Well, taking into account what you said before the verses too, about the path being different from the end destination, I think there's a distinction where the path to enlightenment is good. Krishna improves you, maintains you, keeps you, but there's a distinction between knowing him and just knowing of him that's higher. Thinking about
I mean, I just followed you. Sometimes when I have a mild look of disagreement, like with my gentleman over there, what's your name, sir? Matthew. You guys just repeat yourselves as if I'm stupid and not able to follow you. But I understood what you said. I just didn't quite agree with it. I understood you perfectly well. Sometimes you guys just keep repeating yourself as if I'm going to get it the second time. But I got it the first time. That look, that quizzical look or whatever you saw was me not quite agreeing with you. You're right. That whole little thing I said about the path and the destination that seemed like a tangent wasn't a tangent. And you're really close, but you didn't quite get it. But you're getting real close. You and Matthew got really close. I don't think you guys realize how close you got. I see you. It's disturbing to me. I see you. Please, just stop. If I look at you, it means I saw you. But this whole don't do that, please. It's like disturbing. It's like a weird tick. No, man, I got you. I'm here, Ross. We're friends. I'm always looking at you, man. I get you. Like, you're right there. I'll swing back around you. I want to see if anybody else who hasn't talked yet. That's what's going on. I saw you before. I saw you in Mason, but I wanted Mason because he was new. Yeah, Matt. Yell at
A little bit of work goes a long way.
me. Ooh, jeez, man. All right. I'm going to give Matt the win. He didn't get it, but he got it. You guys will see in a second. With this whole idea of grace, in this path, there's no loss or diminution in this effort. And a little bit of advancement delivers you from the greatest type of danger, the greatest fear. Is grace automatically a part of that? The answer is no. Could I be an atheist and say that if you do a little bit of good for another human being, even a little bit, that will help you become a better person, and you'll never lose that? Could I reasonably make that statement as an atheist, as a human secularist? Yes, I could. If I could reasonably make that statement as a human secularist, as a secular humanist, excuse me, if I could, sorry, you guys are dragging me down here. If I could reasonably make that point as a secular humanist, as an atheist do-gooder, that means there's no grace in it, inherently. Now, could it be that it delivers you because there's grace that comes? It's not explicitly stated in the verse, but it's there in other verses, and so you should read that verse as including grace? Sure, you could do that. But there's no explicit grace in the first verse. The first verse is all about what you do. That's why I said you take one step towards me. You were the first person to talk about our effort, our personal effort. And of course you said, was it a little effort goes a long way?
Yeah, basically.
Do you see how both of you guys hit that point? The first verse is about our effort. Remember I said there's two buckets? So by you guys saying everything was about the same thing, clearly there's no way it was what I was thinking of, because the entire premise was there were two distinct points made. I did this with my hands a bunch of times. I did acknowledge that 2, 3, and 4 were in the same bucket, but I said one was in its own bucket. And so I tried to put them all in one bucket together. For sure you didn't get what I was saying, because I made it clear what I was looking for at the outset. Did you guys follow that? One was about our efforts. In this path, there's no loss or diminution. Even a little bit of advancement in this Dharma can deliver you from the greatest type of fear. It's very much about you and what you're doing. Did you follow that? 2, 3, and 4 included that as well. If you think of me, for those who are always thinking of me, if you take shelter of me, then I will do this. So the reciprocity was definitely there in 2, 3, and 4. But they were very much about what Krishna does to help you. Did you follow this? So grace was there. Grace does include reciprocity. There is a sense in which grace is an unlimited reciprocation, and therefore it's something beyond what you could ever achieve on your own. Krishna is trying to get you to pursue the path. Sure, that's 100% a valid point, and that's actually there in all of the verses. He's trying to say, I'm going to help you. It's clearly all the verses have that. That's why I appreciate it. That was truly something that was there in all 4 verses, whereas the grace stuff wasn't there in all 4 verses, nor is the reciprocity there in all 4 verses. What did you say again?
Oh, the Dharma.
I appreciated that. That was cool. I caught that too, and I was like, wow. And then you came up with this, it was very much what he was saying too. Like, why not? What's the loss? It's a very good thing. You should do it. So you were, in a slightly different way, making quite a similar point. It was a little distinct, but it was very similar. I'm giving everybody feedback now. Now's not the right time to talk. But I do want to hear what you have to say, very much so. And so it was very similar to what he was saying, that there's no reason not to, and you everything to gain and nothing to lose, and I'm advertising and saying you should do this for sure. But the point you made, Matthew, that I appreciate so much, was you said, if you take one step towards me, and that indicates you're doing something. And you nailed that too, Matthew. Did I catch it? Did I respond to everybody who spoke? Okay. So I was listening carefully to what you guys were saying. And I appreciate, and all of you had something of value to add. There were no points. Sometimes you ask people for feedback and they just say something that has nothing to do whatsoever with the verses. None of you guys did that. Everything you said was related to verses. But one was very much about, you rocking a stash or a beard? Oh yeah, it's legit. Looking good, man. Well, I'm not a big fan of a mustache, to be honest, but you rock it. The Latino thing with the mustache. You got it going on, man. You got it down. It's legit. It's cool. You got a good, nice flowing mustache. I've been giving him a hard time about it, but I'm giving you props. What's it called? Pachuco? The Zutsu guys? Pachuco, right? You're rocking that Pachuco stash. You guys know about the Pachuco culture? All the Mexicans do. None of you white people do. Anybody who doesn't have brown skin know about Pachuco? Black people get to do this too. Even though technically you have brown skin also. Sometimes when Mexican people want to be like super cool, I mean not just Mexican people, Spanish speaking people want to be super cool, they'll call black people moreno. But that's not actually the proper term. The proper term is negro, not moreno. And like if you talk to black people from South America, they'll describe themselves as negro. Moreno is mulatto, moreno, they're different terms. But Pachuco, you guys don't know that term, huh? The Pachuco culture was this anti-establishment in the 30s and 40s. Mexican Americans who didn't want to assimilate and become like white men and dye their skin. There's a whole thing with dyeing your skin. It was very, very popular amongst black people and Mexican people. And to this day, if you go to India, they got skin dyes all over the place in India. I don't think you can get them in the U.S. anymore. But in India, you can buy skin lighteners. They're all over the place, and people use them. I knew devotees who used skin lighteners. Because, for most of recorded history in most of the world, the blacker your skin was, the worse you were. I mean, you go back to the Egyptians, and when they were trying to tell you who was down the totem pole, you had the Nubians, who were kind of like they're really the northern Egyptians because they're from the higher altitudes, but they're southern from the point of view of like the planet because they were from south of the south of the Sudan. They were sub-Saharan, south of the Sahara. They had dark skin. If you look, they had white-skinned people, then they had Egyptians, they had red-skinned people. The Egyptians were brown-skinned, and then they had black people on their hieroglyphics. And sometimes you had Nubian Egyptian lords. Sometimes they won, but mostly it was the brown-skinned people ruling over everybody else if you look at the hieroglyphics. So the Pachuco culture. You surprised I know about this stuff? No, not you, man. Huh? The Pachuco culture was like the origin of Chicano culture. I ran with a Chicano gang, so I know all this stuff. The Chicanos were born, generally speaking, Chicanos were born in this country, but they were of Latin American heritage. They considered themselves to be superior to people who were born in Latin America. They were bigoted and racist against the mojos, against the wets. Mojo means wet. And there's some dispute over why they're called mojos. Some people think it's because they swam across a river to get here. Generally, they were going across deserts to get here. But anyway, the real reason they're called mojos is because they worked as migrant laborers. And their backs were wet because they were bent over the lettuce fields and growing crops in California for, slightly better than slave wages. I mean, much better than slave wages because slaves don't get paid at all. But for less than the going rate. and they worked real hard. And so the Chicanos looked down upon them, and they didn't want Mojos joining our gang. They considered them to be uncool. Now there's no more Chicanos left, and so they got to beg for the Mojos to join their gang now. And they'll even take Salvadorans and stuff like that. Whereas it used to be they just took Mexicans in the gang. Anybody who's familiar with Latin American culture, they know that Latin American people can be quite bigoted and racist in their own right. But it's like a FUBU thing. They can get away with it because it's their people. Not really, but it's a lot better than a white person being bigoted. Right? Mexican people can be quite bigoted, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. Not just against other races, but also against people from different parts of Latin America. But the Chicano culture and the Pachuco culture, which is the precursor, was this movement amongst Latin Americans not to assimilate, not to make it the goal of life to become a light-skinned, straight-haired white person. They were proud of their culture. They didn't want to fit in. And they wore zoot suits. And they were flamboyant. And they were criminals. And they smoked weed. And they got in trouble. And they fought with the law. They came out of Texas. But they had a massive, huge presence in Southern California. Bigger than their presence in Texas. This is like the heart of the Pachuco culture. In Los Angeles in the 30s and 40s. Proud Mexicans. Proud of their heritage, not wanting to assimilate with the white man, and celebrating their unique position. Being in the U.S., but having this other culture they were drawing from. And there was a machismo thing going on, but it was I think they call it Pachuquismo. They have their own, it was a particular thing, and they were flamboyant, and they were great dancers, and they were tough guys. You know all about this? It's your heritage, right?
Part of it, yeah.
Yeah. That died out, but it came back with a vengeance with the Chicano culture, which also died out and came back with a vengeance. We're on the third or fourth wave of it now. Anyway, your mustache is legit. That was a true tangent. It has no value whatsoever for the class. I saw it and I was like, you pulling that off real well. I give Nick heat. He finally shaved his stash off. He's like, maybe there's something wrong with this. He's going to shave it off because Tukes give me heat every time I rock it. And so... yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon in the post-colonial period in any culture, where people have to recapture their heritage. They learn from the dominant culture their heritage. We teach people about their Mexican heritage in the white schools. We teach people about slavery. We teach people about Vietnam. The British taught the Indians about their own heritage. And there's a point when you break free, when you have to recapture your heritage and study history more objectively and more globally, to not fall into the crippled version of history that you get from the colonizers. The whitewashed version, literally, of history that you get from the colonizers. And you got to go back and you got to figure it out. And sometimes they get it wrong. Black people are thinking they were the original Ethiopians, but you look at the hieroglyphics and you see it wasn't the case. And sometimes people get stuff wrong. They want to do the Kemetic yoga. Say yoga's coming from Egypt, There's just no real support for that. And then, but usually they get it right, and they find stuff that got whitewashed out. I mean, if you take a U.S. history class when I was a kid growing up, there was almost nothing about what we did to Indians, the Native Americans. There's almost nothing about what we did to those indigenous peoples. The genocidal wipeout of those people. And it was like Thanksgiving, it was good times, and there was no smallpox, and no bad stuff getting passed around. And we weren't cheating people out of land, and like they were all friendly, and like, you know, that's not true. We walked from one end of this country to the other with manifest destiny, raping, killing, subjugating everybody who lay in our path because it was our duty to God. It was our manifest destiny to control from sea to shining sea. Much to the chagrin and torturous disappointment of the people who've been living here since the dawn of creation, practically. So it's important. You go back. You stop trying to assimilate. You rewrite history. You take back words. You take back words. And those words become your words. And, you choose which words you want to be defined by. You no longer use the words to describe you that were used by other people. Do you understand the word Hindu is an outsider's term? It's a Persian word. It's a Persian word to describe the indigenous people in India who were being subjugated, traded with originally and then subjugated by the Persians and the Muslims. It predates Islam. But if you look at the Vedic texts, they never use the word Hindu. And in our medieval texts, we never use the word Hindu when we're talking about ourselves. We only use it when we're contrasting ourselves to the Muslims. So when you read medieval texts that talk about Hindu-Muslim relations, then we use the word Hindu. But when we just have our own theological text, the word's never used. It's an outsider's term. So you got to take it back. Decide what you want to call yourself. All right. That was a long tangent, but the first verse is about what you do. It's about the path. That's why I was appreciating what you said, Mason. You were almost there, you know? Was it you? Yeah, you almost got it. And so the first verse was about the path that you undertake, the hero's journey that you undergo. And then the subsequent verses are about the reciprocation to help you get along the way. In the form of carrying you what you lack and preserving what you have, in the form of enlightening you from within, in the form of ultimately helping you in every way. It's more and more intense. And those verses take place in the 9th, 10th, and 18th chapter of the Gita. So there's a progression there. And Krishna intensifies his appeal. Anyway, what I want to talk about today was this. Sometimes when you're on the road and you're using Waze, if you're smart, and you make a wrong turn, you just make a U-turn and get right back on the road. But if you go far enough down the wrong road, you don't make a U-turn anymore. Waze recalculates, and you take a different journey. A totally different journey through different cities. You might end up taking the 5 instead of the 405. And you're going through different cities. It's totally different. Sometimes we make mistakes in life. And our path back to Krishna changes irrevocably. Heraclitus said that. He's an ancient Greek philosopher, Heraclitus the Obscure, around the time of Buddha, but in Greece. He said you never step into the same river twice because the water's different and so are you. You make a mistake in your life. And sometimes it irrevocably changes your path. And there's no going back to before ground zero. And that attempt to sort of nostalgize the past and go back to the past, it's delusional and of little benefit. And it's it can even be degenerative. You guys following this? On the flip side, if you do something good with your life, like you start moving towards Krishna, that also irrevocably changes your life and your path. It works both ways. If you still have the same destination, usually we do a pretty good job of indoctrinating our devotees, helping them to imbibe our doctrine. Again, religions usually have a template and some basic answers to life's most pressing questions, and that's the whole benefit of a tradition, is that it gives you some ready-made, well thought out, persuasive, coherent, astute answers to some of life's basic questions. There's plenty of room for you to do your own thing. You learn how to box. They teach you about the 5 basic punches. There's 2 types of punches, curving punches and straight punches. You got your 5 basic punches. You got your jabs and your crosses, and your hooks and uppercuts, and your overhands. There's other punches. There's the bolo punch. There's other punches you can do. But they teach you some of the basics, and for boxers, they don't find that to be oppressive. They find it to be freeing. You teach a musician some chords, and they start playing different chords. They usually don't find that to be oppressive. You taught them chords. They find that to be freeing. You teach them how to sing in different notes and different melody structures. It's freeing. Different spice mixes. If you're cooking in the kitchen, it's freeing. It helps you really figure out, what am I going to do? What are my different options? Different yoga poses. Oh, you're trying to control me. No, it helps you to have a repertoire of asanas. Having definitive answers and options, and taxonomies and categorization, it helps us to make sense out of the world in which we live and start to move forward. It doesn't have to be oppressive, negative. So, sometimes you make a mistake and you might have the same goal, but your path to get there is going to be different now. You never go back to what it was. It takes a little maturity to wrap your head around that. Of course, you got the people who are like, I don't want to go there anyway, like my 3-year-old. But when you actually make a mistake and you've blown it and you shouldn't have done that, and then it changes the world in which you live, it takes a maturity to forgive yourself and see grace and beauty in the new path which is available to you. You guys following this? Your goal is the same, but you made some mistake, and so you have to take another course to get to where you want to go. But sometimes you do something right. You turn towards Krishna when you're 21 or something like that. And the whole tapestry of your life changes. topography of your life changes. You might have a new goal. Like I said, we indoctrinate well. We usually give people a goal, but you're in a different universe. You see things differently. The saddest thing for me is watching people fall away from their spiritual vision and they just become a dimmer, darker, less luminous, less intelligent, less enlightened, more foolish version of themselves. You ever witnessed that? You ever been that? And what it is this. Nobody wants to explain it or admit it, but here's what it is. You don't actually change your philosophy. What you do is you have a desire, and then you pursue your desire. But if you were to hold on to the same philosophy, you would feel really bad about yourself. You follow this? There's no deficiency in our theology. But people are lusty, or they want to use drugs, or they want to go have a list of sex, or something like that, and then they start to feel guilty because they're acting at odds with the value system they've adopted. So the natural thing is you feel guilty and torn, and it creates cognitive dissonance. And so the way to resolve that cognitive dissonance is to give up one of the two things, but you don't want to give up the thing you're doing, so you invent a philosophy to justify it. You follow? It's actually just your desire that you're pursuing. You understand? And then in your mind, like a drunk person who's muttering to himself and thinks he's really cool, like sometimes you see a drunk person talking to himself. He thinks he's Elon Musk or something like that. He thinks he's really got it down. But if you were to record him and play it back to him the next day, you'd be so embarrassed. Or like the way somebody dances when they're drunk, or the way they sing when they're drunk. Out there somewhere there's a tape with me rapping on it drunk. Venice Beach, 1987. You know? Somehow I thought I really had it down. I was or somebody take LSD and you write out a map to the meaning of the universe. You discover the key to the universe. You write it all out, and then you wake up the next day and it's just gibberish. Oh man, I gotta write this down. I figured it all out. And the next day you look at it and it's like, Timothy Leary's wife used to come to our temple. Timothy Leary was in Laguna Beach. As they were together, she dropped, so much acid, a cup full of acid or something like that. And she used to come and open up the trash cans because she said the fruit flies were calling to her and asking her to release them. Just a random factoid from my life. Who even knows who Timothy Leary is? Raise your hand. He was a doctor from, I believe it was Harvard University, who experimented with LSD with his students and then became a bit of a cult figure in the 60s and 70s. I read an article with him in like around 2000 or something like that. He was getting old, he was ready to die. And he said, yeah, I just engineered the internet revolution. I did the counterculture and then I just did the internet. So I'm like, I'm good, I've done it twice. He's trying to take credit for the... All right, so... if you're free of desire, things become really clear. But when you have a desire for it to work out one way or another, then you start to, in your mind, philosophize to try to justify what it is you already want to do. But If you were honest, it has nothing to do with the philosophy. You invented the philosophy after the fact to justify what you want to do anyway. You know? Like that girl wasn't good for you. If you were dispassionate, you could see it. But it's always, oh yeah, you know, mushrooms are blue and that girl was really... Just saying. And we laugh, and I can make fun of Matt because we're cool like that. He's my people, and so I can make fun of him like that, and he's not going to sweat me. But we've all done this. And so we should practice the art of thinking about things as if we had no desires, as if our only desire was to do the right thing. You can spend some time exploring your desires, but when it comes down to deciding what you want to do with your life, you should start out, if I had no desires, my only desire was to achieve truth and move forward, then what would I do? It's a healthy way to start. I try to do that. And sometimes, you know, what I want to do isn't what I end up doing, but that's okay. I'm grown up enough where I don't have to fulfill every single desire I have. That one always comes and stops. That's the last one. It stops. I know that song. Yeah. We should try to see the big picture regularly. Not dumb ourselves down. Not dim our light. Live with the discomfiture of having things in our life which are not in consonance with our highest ideals, but not give up our highest ideals. Just live with the natural guilt that comes with not living up to your highest ideals, but we want to enshrine those highest ideals and keep a spotlight on them so that we can gradually, over the course of our lives, develop the fortitude to do better. And so I was reflecting on this verse on the way up. And I was thinking about how sometimes you take a path and it just changes everything. And it's not the same river anymore. And you're not the same person anymore. And you can have remorse about the mistake you made, and you can still, with enthusiasm, now embark on the wonderful, beautiful, meaningful new path that's available to you. And sometimes you just were foolish, but you happen to come in touch with the devotees. Usually, for most of us, that's what... Sometimes something really just random and valuable, and you happen to make the right decision, and your whole life changes. And a whole new path opens up to you. And when Krishna says, on this path there's no loss or diminution, even a little bit of advancement, he means if you just start to step towards Krishna a little bit, it changes the map of your life. The saddest thing is when a devotee goes back and reverts back and dims their light. But sometimes you even see devotees, they make a big mistake, like, oh, my man Krishna Das made some mistakes in life. Change your life. Irrevocably. You spent 12 years inside, doing hard time. You made it work for you. You know? Sure, you shouldn't have robbed that place. Or you shouldn't have done a strong arm robbery, instead of an armed robbery, whatever. You know? I'm sure you've rethought that thing a gazillion times. I get it. But you did what you did, you wound up doing over a decade of hard time. Okay? Whole new path that had to go through prison. Maximum security prison. Whole path. Involved you getting involved with Serenios, right? You had to roll with the Serenios, right? Just to stay aloof, right? You kept Krishna in your heart, you turned towards Krishna, you learned from the experience, you got out, you got the rest of your life to live, you're going to make it work. You can still blow it again. You don't blow it in the same way, but you could, start drinking again and do whatever and mess up your life and go down that bitter road, that negative road. You got options if you want to screw your life up. But there's literally nothing you can do that doesn't give you a new path back to Krishna. That's the great thing about an all-good, all-powerful deity, is there's always a way that map reorients itself and takes you to where you want to go. We want to get clear on the destination we want to go to. We want to try to make these really good decisions sometimes that just open up a whole new world to us. And when we make a bad one, then we got to feel the appropriate remorse. We don't do that again next time, and then learn to live with the new beautiful path that's laid in front of us, and be satisfied with that. So I started thinking about this on the way up. And I thought, but that verse is very by itself very atheistic. And so the reciprocity factor I want to include, and that's why I thought of the other verses. Because that gives you the reciprocity factor. And there's an internal reciprocity where Krishna enlightens you from within. There's an external one where he helps move pieces around the table. And then there's like the ultimate one. He makes your life a success because you grow closer to him through life and the whole life becomes successful. Each one of the three verses I quoted had sort of a different thing. He carries you what you lack and preserves what you have. He enlightens you from within with a shining lamp of knowledge, or he delivers you from all difficulties ultimately. Carries you home. I think it's important we try to have big thoughts daily. We try to give up our desires daily. We try to commune with Krishna daily. We cry out to Krishna in a desireless state where we just want Krishna. And we train ourselves like that. And we see the big picture. And when we do that, even that act of seeing the big picture and turning towards Krishna sincerely, that is itself a little bit of advancement on this path that delivers you. Because it changes the way you view the world. And then when you go back to the world, you don't see the same world anymore. It's not the same river. You're a different person. And the river looks different. And you don't make the same mistakes. And every day, you just move towards seeing the big picture. Move towards surrendering to Krishna. It doesn't completely remove your material desires. You'll have to go back and step into your desire suit. But it does change things. And it makes it a little more tolerable. And it makes it a little more that you can navigate this world more surgically. So I was on my way up. I was thinking about this verse. I was thinking about how that's true whether you do a good thing or a bad thing. I was thinking about how the journey may change, but the destination won't. I was thinking about when that destination changes, that's a good thing if you change it to Krishna. But it's a bad thing if you drop Krishna from your destination and you're starting to go whatever. I thought the Virgin of Guadalupe, but whatever. You can start to go somewhere else, And so, You got to think about the destination. The path may differ. It could be good or bad. There's room for remorse, but the path is going to be different. Maturity allows you to, but then there's also room for Krishna's reciprocation. And that takes many different forms. That's kind of what I was thinking about on the way up. If you join us on Instagram, thank you so very much. Appreciate you guys so much. Give me some feedback.